If you've worked in payments long enough, you understand that bins represent the central building blocks of card payments. If networks have their way, stablecoins will ride their acceptance network through a card as well. If you're a merchant, do you know if your card that your customer just used is a virtual card or a plastic? Was it issued by Walmart or Green Dot? Will it route through Discover or Troy? Most merchants can't answer these questions. A lot is unknown, and many are still using 6-digit bins that are outdated. Meanwhile, the industry's already moved on to 8 digits. I'm Kapil. Today, I'm speaking with Grace Greenwood, who's been educating the industry on bins for years, and Andy Barker, who builds bin intelligence at Pagos. Let's dive into the bin madness. So Grace, you've written more about bins than I think anybody on the planet at this point. Let's start with how we got here, because most merchants missed the 6 to 8 shift entirely. What forced the networks to expand to 8?
Well, in short, we outgrew the 6-digit system. So when bins were only 6 digits, we were limited with exactly how many bins were possible. And so when we're talking about bins, we're not talking about one bin per card, but more one bin per a group of cards that all share the same characteristics, like same issuer, card product, country of origin, et cetera. And when you think of it that way, it's hard to believe that we would ever run out of bin combos. But ultimately, I mean, we've seen in the industry over the last decade plus the number of card issuers and card products and like dual branded arrangements has just exploded. And I think you might have even given me this stat, Kapil, that they're anticipating that by 2029, there's going to be some like 30 billion different card products in global circulation. And if that's the case, we really were staring down the barrel of running out of bins. It's not dissimilar. I like to think about it in terms of like with phone numbers. We originally had 7 digits for a phone number. That gave us plenty of combinations. And then cell phones happened, and we outgrew a system that was built for a smaller world. So we had to add area codes to give us some more digits. So that's exactly what happened with bins. The powers that be saw back in like 2017 that we were going to run out and implemented a timeline for moving from 6 to 8-digit bin issuance. Card networks complied, and by April of 22, Visa and MasterCard had stopped issuing 6-digit bins. And now we all get to navigate the complexity of living in a world with both 6 and 8-digit bins.
I love that. So 3 years later, what's the biggest misconception you see most often on the shift?
There's 2, and I think Andy can probably speak to this as well. 2 really big ones. First one being, people like to tell us that their PSP gives them all the bin data that they need, and that is categorically incorrect. PSPs have no incentive to give you all the data. If you had the granular level of data that's available with an 8-digit bin, you might learn that it would actually be cheaper for you to process a transaction through a different PSP, or that you would have a higher approval rates through a different PSP. So like it does not behoove them to give you all the data. So you actually need to get it directly from the networks or from a product like Pagos that gets it directly from the networks. So you actually are getting enough data to make a decision that's right for you and not what's right for your PSP's bottom line. Similarly, we hear a lot, people will say that bin data doesn't actually change that often. It does. It changes a lot. Andy can tell you every week when we pull our data, when we update it from the card networks, there are changes. There's new bin ranges, deleted ranges, added ranges. Oops, we deleted one last week that we're now adding back in. We wrote a blog about this last year. MasterCard had done a study of their customers and saw that of the merchants who are only pulling the MasterCard bin file every 1 to 3 months, they had, it was like a 20 to 30% outdated bin rate. And similarly, Visa had done a study comparing their bin file to that of a third-party bin provider and saw that only 32% of that bin provider's data was correct. I actually wrote down the rest of the stats. Andy, I told you this was going to come in handy. But they saw in the file that 52% had the issuer wrong, 24% had the wrong card product, and 14% had the wrong card type, which is like credit, debit, prepaid. Pretty brutal to have that one wrong. Basically, it just means that if you're only pulling your bin file once a quarter, or you're getting it from somebody who's only pulling it once a quarter, and you're using that data to make business decisions like retries and routing and cost estimations and fraud rules, et cetera, you're making business decisions based on incorrect data. And you have to keep updated because the data does change a lot more than people think it does.
That's interesting. When I was on the processor, on the operator side, when you actually asked for the bin file, it was like the holy grail. Nobody wanted to share it. You had to beg, borrow, steal, and negotiate your way to getting a bin file. Nobody ever thought about, well, you need the file almost on a regular basis. You spend 6 months negotiating getting a file. Some acquirers do charge for it. I'll say that out loud, but it gets outdated as soon as you get the file. So, Andy, a lot of companies rely on PSP bin data. What could go wrong?
I'll jump back to something that Grace had said, the 6 to 8 digit range. I mean, it was April 2022. So we are, a month away from 4 years of the transition. There are PSPs that will only give you 6 digits at this point, which means the data that they're providing to you actually hamstrings you from actually being able to properly segment your customer set based on their bin ranges. They know that it's 8 digits, and we even in our analysis, you might even have to go all the way down to the 10th digit to be able to get at the accurate information that's there. So you're kind of stuck on both sides. It's like the PSP, the acquirer, might not give you enough information. And to your point, they're saying, well, if you want to match that information, you either have to pay for it, or you know what, we'll give you this information because we're so great. But by the way, we don't update this on a regular basis. So one of the key things is bins are always changing. There's a cost. I don't think people understand that an issuer has to pay the networks to get a bin. So because no more 6 digits are being issued, you might have an issuer that was assigned a 6 digit prior to that cutoff that is themselves cutting up a 6 digit into 7, 8, 9, 10 digits to identify different sets of products or different things within. Country is a big thing. If they're issuing to different countries, they might segment that range in there. So when you go to your acquirer, there's really no incentive for them to give you ultimately the most fresh and accurate information, because they fear you will use it against them. If they were all in your favor, you wouldn't have to use that data against them. But they don't want to use it against it because you could prove that there is better acceptance, cheaper cost, or anything else on a different network that's associated with it. So when it comes to the acquirers have to have a bin. So we hear it called the routing table. They have to know when a transaction comes in. They look at that full bin to determine where they should route that transaction, them as an acquirer, across the processing networks to the specific issuer. So they have to have the information. The problem is they don't necessarily want to give that to anybody else because they think, again, they'll use it against them. But it is such mission critical for you as a customer and a merchant to be able to do a better job, understand your customer base, be able to hold your processors accountable. So acquirers, there isn't really that incentive that's there to do it, which makes it super difficult for you. Again, I don't say it's not important. It is mission critical to your business. But if you simply sit on your laurels and think that your acquirer is there in your corner to help you, you might want to take a step back and assess that a little better.
It's interesting. You said something to me, I think a week ago when we were talking about this topic. You go, the acquirers have a different file than everybody else.
Yep.
Why not have one file for everybody if it's so central to everything carbs?
That would make sense, right? But again, that's the core routing table that has everything. So think of kind of the mechanics that run on this. So we know on a card has a bin, but if you look at a card, there's front and back networks. So front of card is usually your credit network. Usually it's your global network. Now, if you have a debit card, that front of card is one brand, again, global, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover. But in the back of the card, because of the Durbin regulation in the United States, it requires 2 disparate networks for routing that transaction. That's part of the Durbin regulation. It wasn't just capping on fees. It was you need to give choice to the actual merchants to be able to route these transactions. So every card, almost every card, you have a potentially cheaper way to route that transaction if you route it across the debit network. Okay. Every acquirer needs to know about the debit networks that are there. They need to know about the global networks. They need to know all that. If an issuer or an acquirer gives you the ability to route it at a cheaper cost, who's actually paying for that cost differential? It's usually them. Why do you think Capital One bought Discover? They didn't buy Discover because they thought, oh, Discover's got this great card brand and stuff. They bought Discover because of a loophole that allowed Cap One to now switch all their debit cards from regulated, which means 22 cents, to an unregulated bank, which now means they can charge full interchange on this. So they're not in our favors. I know that's going to light so many people's hair on fire, but they're not in our favor. So if they gave you all the information, we as merchants would be informed at the same level they are and could potentially make decisions that impact their pocketbooks.
It's interesting. So let's take a step back. We went from the 6 to 8. If I was to search today 535412 bin, and I tried this on our bin product on Pagos, it says, oh, no result, or here's 100 other 8-digit banks that do fit that range. Make sense of it.
So that is the conundrum that comes along with overlapping ranges and between the 6 and the 8 digits is an 8-digit range fits in a 6 digits, but the 6 digit may not actually be the card in the 8. As an example, Klarna. Klarna, we all know in Sweden, Swedish company. So they issue debit cards. If you search based on I think it's the 8-digit range, all of the countries will be Sweden. You have to actually go down to the 9th or the 10th digits. I believe it's the 9th that breaks up by country. So we had a customer that was searching only on 8 digits and we restrict cards that can be added by customers if they are not in the country of the origin of the card. And they were saying, your data is wrong. It's all coming back Sweden. And we're like, you got to add a couple extra digits because that's what Klarna's doing is they're actually cutting them down. So in your case, if you're looking at 6, that 6 may be assigned to a very large bank, say Chase. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's your individual card range, because if you break it down by 8, then it'll show up there. So when you look at ranges, it's not generally you get one that says 6 and one that says 8 and one that says 9 and one that says 10. Usually they're bin mins and bin maxes. So basically you get what is the minimum for this range, which basically is usually padded out to 19 digits with zeros. And then what is the max range, which is what is the max between that min padded out to 19 digits with 9s on there. So you can actually have super ranges, which encompass multiple ranges at the beginning min and the beginning max, or you could have a subset that actually fits in there. So depending on the data you have, if you're just simply seeing 6 digits here and that's it, and in some cases, some of the networks just provide that information, but most of the globals don't, you're missing out on insight to be able to identify what Kapil's card is.
Well, I can say my head's already spinning, so thank you. Grace, let's go to you. 6 to 8 is a problem, obviously, that whole transition. What other complications could possibly exist at this point with intelligence?
Yeah, I think a big one, white labeled card issuance can be pretty messy. This is basically where you have a big company, so think like a Walmart or a Target, that issues their own cards that have their branding on them. But Walmart didn't issue the card. They have a card that was issued by Green Dot, for example. Now, if you're a merchant and you see a transaction come in and you look at the bin data and it shows you that it's a green dot prepaid card, you know how to handle those. But what you don't realize is that this is actually a Walmart money card. And that matters because the profiles of a customer who is using a Walmart money card and a customer who's using just a generic green dot prepaid card are different. They have different spending habits and different fraud profiles. And so you will be operating on information that, while it is technically correct, is practically misleading. And it's basically up to you to figure that out. Similar but different is the dual branded cards, especially when you're processing transactions internationally. This is one where the bin data does tell you that a card is dual branded, but it's up to you to really figure out what's happening as you're processing the same card with the same bin, but in different places around the globe. So, like, you process that card in the US and it's Discover, you process it in Japan and it's JCB, and Turkey, it's Troy Network. And if you've built out fraud rules and retries and routing decisions around it being a Discover card, but then you process it in a different geographical location, suddenly you're on a different network with different rules. And you have to actually map out what that card will be processed as based on the geographical location of the transaction. And if you don't know to do that, there's going to be cost and risk implications just because what you've established as your system isn't going to work appropriately.
Oh, dual branded, huh? Oh, got a couple of questions on that one, but let's add a little bit more complexity to this. I cracked up when you said virtual card last week was a big issue. And then there's no change history. What's all that about?
Yeah, so I'll touch on the change history because that one is just always kind of been there. The one thing that I think most people don't understand is that the list you get, wherever that comes from, the original source information is the network. So either the networks are giving it to the acquirers or the processors, or a third-party aggregator is scraping it from side. It originates at the networks. They provide data as what I like to call it insert only. It's basically a snapshot in time when you pulled it down of these are all the valid bins that are here today. It doesn't give you information about, hey, here's also a set of bins that we used to have, or these ones are going to be updated, or these ones are scheduled for deletion, or these ones are transitioning. So if we talk about like the Cap One, where Cap One is going through brand conversion from Visa, MasterCard over to Discover, those changes don't exist in the bin data. It's just basically you get the file. This is a snapshot in time. So there's no history that's associated with that. So when transitions happen, that can wreak havoc within your system. We had a customer that was actually hard blocking transactions in their checkout if they couldn't find the bin in a file. And it just so happened to be that there was a transition going on, that a bin dropped out. The card was still valid. They could still process it, but they lost thousands of transactions because they basically said, hey, this bin no longer exists. We're not going to take that transaction anymore. So not having history it can be very difficult and can actually result in direct customer impacts and churns, because you don't get warning if something is going to be removed or not. It could be even related to a bug, and a bin drops off of a file for 1 week, but then shows up the next week kind of thing. So that lack of history and visibility, one, it can have direct impacts. Two, not having visibility into what happened in the past can impact your ability to adjust fraud rules, marketing campaigns, basically segmentation of your customers, or even being able to identify where is the business that I have regionally kind of thing. So that's a huge impact that people have to struggle with. We at Pogos have had to struggle with that, as well as being able to answer those questions of, hey, this bin was here this week, why wasn't it that way? Go back to the source information from the network, it's like it's not there. Then you got to go back to the network and say why, and then it's a back and forth. And by then, it's already caused its damage. So being able to have history is a really important thing that is not inherently baked into the network bin files, no matter what they are. The second one you asked about is virtual cards. So this also was, kind of caused the reason to need to run to 8-digit bins is because the explosion of products that are there. All of us have credit cards that have a virtual component of that. I was playing with it yesterday. I have every single card imaginable that I can get at because I'm a payments nerd. But I have a Chime card. So Chime is actually issued by Bancorp. And in my app, I can see my Chime debit card, but I also can see my Chime virtual card. Those are completely two different cards. Now, the 10th digit, I'm guessing, is what dictates the difference between the physical and the virtual, but they operate the same, they feel the same. The problem is virtual usually don't work for reoccurring or MIT transactions. If you're a large subscription merchant that depends on that reoccurring transaction, and you have no way to identify if a card is virtual or not, you're taking the first sale. Or let's add even more kind of alcohol into the wound. What if you offer a free trial but require a credit card so that they know in 30 days they're going to charge it? What if somebody puts in a virtual card knowing that an MIT won't work? They get 30 days of your service for free. You go to charge it as a merchant because the customer did what they wanted to do, which is I want to charge my card, and it can't charge. Without the visibility into that, the problem is virtual cards are dictated by the issuer, not the network. So getting at virtual information is super, super, super difficult, but it is also super important, primarily for those companies that are running on try before you buy or recurring subscription types businesses. So this is where even if you are hyper focused, you've got good bin information, there are things that are critical to your business that the bin file doesn't offer to you.
Now I have this visual of you just testing all these different cards sitting in a room. Like it's just, I won't be able to get that out of my head for a while.
Just flipping through them.
Yeah, exactly.
When I was 10 years old and started in the industry, I had such horrible credit because I applied for every single credit card that was available, not realizing that impacted my credit rating.
Oh my goodness. All right, Grace.
That's
We kind of
ridiculous.
talked a little bit about what's been broken besides his mindset over here of testing all these cards. Let's talk about what's missing. Bin data does tell you a lot. There's still a lot that doesn't tell you. What would that be?
I'll start off and then I'll pass over you to Grace. One of the first one that kind of jumps off of what I was saying. So bin is network level. It's not issuer level. So bins are assigned to an issuer, but then the issuer is able to then add additional things to that. So generally you'll have like a Visa business card or a commercial card. You'll have a prepaid card. You'll have some of those other things. But you won't know, is this a Chase Sapphire card? So the actual down to the core named product of the issuer, generally you don't get those. You'll be able to identify if they're affluents usually on a card based on it, but you're getting the network indication of what that product is. So if you want to get down to that level of I want Chase Sapphire, or I think there's the JP Morgan Black or all that, you won't get that from bin data. That's one. The second one is because, again, this is network related and not issuer, is as the example, and Grace had said it as well, Bancorp is an issuer that issues for lots of companies. So Bancorp does Chime, they do Venmo for PayPal. So they have bins that are associated with that. In that case, Venmo is MasterCard, Bancorp is Visa. But if they were both the same and they were both issued 8 digits and those 8 digits overlapped with your 6, you would search on 6 digits, you get Bancorp. You have no idea, is this a Chime card? Is this Venmo? We'll go even further. So Grace said Green Dot. Green Dot is also the issuer for Apple Cash. So if you put in the bin, you'll get Green Dot back. You won't get Apple Cash. You'll get Green Dot. You won't get Walmart back in that. How you get at that information is network tokenization, because network tokenization is something the issuer does via the network. And the metadata that you get from network tokenization, because you have the full PAN, is specific to that PAN. So if I want to know that this is an Apple Cash card, I tokenize the card through network tokenization. I pull the metadata and I see, oh, it's Green Dot, but it is an Apple Cash card. So BIN, while super, super powerful, if you want to get to the level of segmentation or understanding of your customer, you have to do more than BIN. And right now, what we understand, availability more than BIN, you can use it as network tokenization. You should be using network tokens anyways because of the benefits that come along with it. But some of these things are being able to actually get card art, being able to know this is a Chase Sapphire card, that this is an Apple Cash card. Maybe you want to handle some of those cards slightly differently or offer discounts. The ability to use payments as a first-class citizen for increasing revenue, when you use these tools, you have the power available to you. So that's my bit. I guess I'm on a bit of a tangent. I'll pass over to Grace.
No, I love your tangent, Sandy. Yeah, I think people sometimes want BIN data to be more than it is because it is just like a snapshot of what a card is. It doesn't tell you anything about what's actually happening with the people and companies behind it. So, like, you have a card that comes through, it's issued by Chase and it's not going through. And so you just keep trying it over and over again because you're looking at the BIN data. You're like, I know this card, this one should go through. It doesn't. So you're just racking up retry charges and you might even label that customer as fraudulent when what's actually happening is that Chase is down. They're having an outage. And I think merchants, what they actually want is like a live health dashboard for issuers of what's going on in real time. But that doesn't exist in any standardized way, and you're not going to get it from BIN data. Similarly, people want the BIN data to tell them about the customer who is using that card. You can just take the signals. You see that the card is some like high level card with Amex that typically is associated with higher cost purchase or higher amount purchases and like lower fraud. But you don't know that the dude who's using that card right now to purchase from you is actually crazy fraudulent and he loves to issue chargebacks. Like, you're not going to learn that from the BIN data. That's going to have to come from your own data as you rack up a history with certain customers. I think there is kind of a need in the industry, a hunger for data that bridges that gap between just like what is a card and what's happening today with who's using it. And we just don't have that yet.
No, that's great. When I take a step back and I look at how cards are issued by, and especially the credit card side, putting debit cards and all that kind of stuff aside, there's some level of FICO scoring that goes into the income and FICO scoring that goes into who gets what card and what kind of benefits are associated with that card. Merchants are funding a lot of this loyalty programs. Wouldn't it be great to know at a credit card level, BIN level, what a range of a FICO score looks like? So if a standard Chase card is between 670 to 720, be good to know. If it's Amex Platinum is 740 and up, would be good to know. Right now, we can't even tell if it's a platinum card or a gold card or a blue card. So it's fascinating. So Grace, final question to you. So you've been educating the payments community and non-payments people for a while now. If you could wave your magic wand and say, hey, all the merchants have to understand one thing about BIN, what would it be?
I mean, I think going back to what I talked about earlier, it's about keeping your BIN database updated. So here at Pagos, we often will talk about how trying to connect with people in the industry and sell Pagos even comes down to, it's like we're selling a medicine to people who don't realize they're sick, is the analogy we like to use. So it's like we have to explain to people that they're sick before they realize they need the medicine. And BIN data feels like something where like that's not so much the case anymore. People are realizing that they're sick. They know that they need this BIN data, but not quite to the extent yet where it's like you need to be pulling it weekly. It needs to be updated. You need to be keeping an eye on these things because I think, yeah, like Andy, your point earlier, someone's like, oh, you know what? We do need BIN data. Let's get it. And then check, we're done. We've got it. Let's just plug into it and we're good to go. When that's not how it works. And you need to have somebody who is there focused on this, who is keeping this data up to date and is making sure that you're operating off of correct information. And I mean, that's an opportunity where AI is going to step in and help teams with that, because you don't need an actual intern sitting there staring at the bin list. But I think that if I could wave the magic wand, it would be for everyone to finally understand you need your bins, you need them updated, and you can't just set it and forget it.
Yeah, it's amazing. The stat that stood out today in this conversation was 32% accuracy that networks have actually communicated. The people that actually release the data are saying only 32, a third is actually accurate. So regardless of where you're getting it from, it's probably likely inaccurate. So, hey, listen, guys, thank you for a great conversation and helping us break this down. For everyone listening, if you're not using 8, you're behind, get on it. And if you want to learn more about it, come check out Pagos and see how we're addressing it. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to Real Talk Payments. To learn more, visit pagos.ai.